So I had played through the entire game thinking there weren't any score multipliers or any type of score really. And then when I began editing the video, looking at my gameplay, I found out there's all kinds of score multipliers in here. But you wanted to know about some of the design things that you may have overlooked. That's definitely one of them, is the graphic design. Hi there, welcome to Games Over Coffee Consulting. People give me their games and I give feedback on their game design. My name is Devon and today we're talking about Scrambled Eggs by Game Jam Jar. There's cartoon violence in this game. This game has to do with running over chickens. It's cartoon violence, but if you're not cool with that, then you can leave. This was a game that was made for the 2023 Game Jam for GMTK, the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam, and it had to do with swapping mechanics. This one was taking the game of Crossy Road and switching mechanics so that you're playing as the cars as opposed to the chickens. There was actually a lot of games like this one, believe it or not. There was one called Reverse Frogger. There was one where you shifted the scenery so that the chicken could go forward. And then there was like this really absurd one where you played as a mother hen who was walking her chicks around traffic, and it was up to you to slow traffic down. You had to get to the other side without crushing all of her babies. And the lose screen is her just crying. Like, what the heck? So the first thing I always like to start with game developers is asking them what kind of gaming experience they want to give, because that really helps me try to figure out whether or not their game is achieving that. In this game, they said that they wanted an arcadey experience. I asked them for a little bit more detail and they sent me an email. And the points that they covered in the email were, we want to achieve the engagement of a player who wants to return to each level and compete for the highest score on the leaderboard, so a competitive engagement. We also want to make this family friendly, so we're trying maybe not to cross the line with the chicken death. Turning into roast chicken seems like the line not to cross. Would love to hear your opinion on where this game would feel most at home, PC, Switch, mobile, etc. Changes in maps and roads are definitely struggling. I feel the change in setting is needed if we're going to have a level-based system. And then one of their other developers said, I was curious in asking for a larger scope, like are there any design flaws that we may have overlooked that could be improved? Another thing that I have personally been thinking about is the possible ways we could implement fail states for the player. Is that a bad idea for a game that is focused on replayability and competitive arcade play? A lot of really good stuff there, so thank you again for emailing me. That really does help me. The first thing I want to talk about overall is the experience that you're looking for. So obviously, yes, I know you want an arcade experience, but you also asked about what kind of system you thought this would be better for, and you included mobile and Switch or a PC. Deciding on what medium to have your game on isn't always super important, but I would argue it's very important for the type of gameplay. If you think about a game like Session, for example, Session plays well on control sticks because that's where manipulating the board comes into play. Now, if we were to transfer something like that onto mobile, then you might have something like True Skate. But True Skate is something very different from Session, right? Those are two completely different types of gameplay. So taking the medium into consideration is definitely something that I think is important. Thinking about that with your game, because I know you said you wanted arcadey, but there's different types of arcade experiences. The ones on mobile, for example, are casual. Now, casual mobile games, because they're more casual in nature, have to do with less time commitment. It's targeting people who are going to open their phone and just play for like a minute or two. So the game doesn't really have any type of external pressure to it, not usually. Something like Fruit Ninja or Angry Birds or Crossy Road. In arcade games, it's a little bit different. If you think about arcades, back in the day when you had to feed quarters into a machine, it's meant to push the player forward over and over and over, getting like really big upgrades and stuff. Think about shmups, right? Like vertical shmups, how they push the player to keep going forward with these bigger and bigger upgrades. Casual games keep it casual. They don't really push the player forward to do anything. They kind of give the player rewards for, getting to a certain part, but it's more the idea of long-term commitment because they know that the player is going to keep coming back to the game over and over after a while. They're not going to try to squeeze you for all your quarters as you're standing at the arcade deck right then and there. So knowing that there's different types of arcade systems here, I would want to ask you what type of arcade experience you're going for, because I believe your game could be a very casual game or it could be a very regular type of arcade experience. When I was a kid, I really, really liked vertical shmups. I think 1944 was probably one of my favorites. I love the feedback that you get from those games. It's the art style is insane. I think in 1944, when you beat one of the bosses, they make newspapers fly in and have these crazy sounds. So in my mind, I think it would be a lot more fun for a game like this to go that route and be a much bigger arcade game that is trying to push the player over and over. That, and I've been playing Vampire Survivors a lot lately, so that's still in my mind. Casual games are a different beast on their own. They have very tight gameplay loops, very, very long challenges, and very elegant design. Like games like Fruit Ninja have really done this well. So the experience that I think that you guys would want to do, or at least in my eyes, is that classic arcade experience. When I'm playing this game, Scrambled Eggs, I'm trying to kill as many chickens as possible, which By the way, I already shot this whole video once, and the reason why I didn't deliver the video is because I found out that there were score multipliers in this game. So I had played through the entire game thinking there weren't any score multipliers or any type of score really. And then when I began editing the video, looking at my gameplay, I found out there's all kinds of score multipliers in here. There's like if you hit the chickens one by one, then the score goes up by each one that you hit. There's a little times number on the side of the vehicles. There's a score underneath the rank that you have. Now, obviously, this is a game jam game, so I can't really, harp too much on the graphic design of everything. So obviously, you just need to rush things out. I get it. But you wanted to know about some of the design things that you may have overlooked. That's definitely one of them, is the graphic design. I didn't even know that each chicken gave me a score. Now, obviously, there is score there at the end. It shows you your score, but I completely forgot about it, and I didn't even really look at it at any time. The reason why that didn't happen is because the graphic design in here, there's no feedback, there's no juicy stuff that's happening. So while I was playing the game, one of the first motivations for me was to stop every single chicken from getting to the other side. I think I did it because there was no other focus that was telling me to do something different, right? I had these cars and I had chickens that were crossing over, and that was it, right? All I knew was that I had to stop them, so that's what I did. And because there was nothing else that said, to do a specific thing, I had to stop them all from getting to the other side. And so I found it kind of weird that when I missed some, it didn't do anything to the experience. And I was just like, oh, that's weird. And then I found out that there was ranks involved. I did a few runs where I was able to stop every single chicken from getting across and survive the whole time, but I only got sadist, which was, I think, the second rank of the whole thing. And that annoyed me because I was like, I stopped every chicken from getting to the other side. But of course, that's not the goal, right? The goal is to simply get, I think, 500 chickens, really. So whenever I hit chickens, I never even noticed that there was a score that came up. I never noticed that there was a little multiplier by the cars when they were there. Those things need to be really obvious, just really obvious and really huge to let the player know this is what's happening. It's very obvious when you kill the chickens because they poof into a poof of feathers, but unfortunately their feathers seem to be rendered on top of the score, which is also white, so it feels like it blends in with the chickens. Then the little score multipliers that are next to the cars are very, very small, smaller than the chickens, I think, and they're kind of this dark blue color, and they also all have the same font, which is very square. It's hard to make out anything with contrast. If I were to redo this and just take into consideration the contrast instead of having to change any fonts or anything like that, I would just make the score maybe gold or red or something like that. Something that is very bright and is big. I would also make everything bigger, make the text much bigger. One graphic design element that's practiced a lot in a lot of arcade games is every time the score grows in number, it also grows in size and sometimes in color. So whereas hitting one chicken might have like a little small 100 that pops up, when you hit the next chicken, then it's a bigger 200, and then the next one is a bigger 300, and then a bigger 400, until it gets, to when you get like a bunch of them, say you get 20 chickens with the big truck, then by the time you hit the 20th chicken, there's a big fat number that comes up, like 2,000 or whatever. It's that kind of stuff, that kind of feedback that I need from the game in order to show me exactly what I should be focusing on. Currently, I believe that the rank kind of overshadows the score, and I would want the score to be like the big thing, and maybe a bonus rank or something like that. And I know that you guys want that competitive type of engagement for the player to keep coming back and trying to beat their highest score. So I know the score should really be that big thing that comes up and lets the player know this is how well you did in the game. If you want to know about juiciness in a game, I did a video a long time ago on a game called Retro Ninja Cyber Assassin. That was on my old series called Dev Brew that I used to do. Check out that video if you'd like to know more about juiciness and feedback. This is also a tangent that I want to take really quickly. Killing the chickens. I know you said that you wanted to keep this family friendly, making them into roast chickens, but it's funny that you say that because on my other video, I actually said maybe each one changes into a roast chicken after, I don't know. So I was thinking about this earlier, and I think one little design trick that would work would be to simply make each chicken angry, just to make them have little angry eyebrows. And that's it. I think what that would do is kind of show the player that these chickens aren't necessarily innocent, that they have some sort of malintent. You don't have to have them like any kind of story reason for them attacking at any side. You don't have to make this a tower defense game or anything like that. Just make them angry. And I think people would be fine with hitting a bunch of them. Keeping all of that in mind, the skill that we have in this game is to try to kill as many chickens as possible. So we're giving the players bigger and bigger things to kill more and more chickens. So that is the skill here, to try to kill as many chickens as possible. That also because you have a death counter at the end. So obviously that's where we're focusing the players' efforts. That being said, in the gameplay loop. I feel like they need to have some sort of motivator to keep them playing. Again, that arcade type of motivation that we talked about before. I think the gameplay loop needs to incorporate that kind of upgrade. So the car wallet on the top of the screen, you have a sports car that costs 1 token. I think the spike car costs 2 or 3 tokens, and then you have the insane truck costs 6 tokens. And then the way that you get the tokens is by sending cars along the road to collect them at different intervals. I don't think collecting the tokens in that way is a good thing for this game. So I would take the cars that you have and I would just restructure them so that they appear as upgrades instead. That way you are motivating the player forward using your gameplay loop. Let's say, for example, the player starts out with that slow car, the beginning car, and they send the car out to go ahead and kill chickens. Well, as they play the game, they find out that the chickens are getting a little bit faster, and as soon as they can kill enough chickens, then maybe only then they upgrade to the next car, being the sports car, and that makes it easier for them to kill all those chickens. Because it's faster, it's able to take them out all at once. Maybe they see that the chickens are beginning to stop on the sidewalk before they cross the road. Once they've killed enough chickens with that sports car, then they'll be able to take care of those other chickens with the spiked car. And then you just keep going forward like that, rewarding the player for their gameplay with things that make their gameplay easier. And then on top of that, you could decide how far you wanted to go with it. If you wanted to make even more vehicles, if you wanted to zoom the level out to access even more lanes of traffic, create huge numbers of chickens like in Vampire Survivors, or you could iterate and have different types of levels. So when we're adding levels to a game, usually it has to do with the type of experience that we want the player to have. So for example, when we look at almost every Super Mario game, just about every Super Mario game has one type of challenge that they're providing for the player that is iterated upon until they get to the end of this world or level or whatever. Then they go to a new level that then has a new type of challenge, and then that challenge is iterated on until they get to the end of that one, and then they keep going and keep going. And the reason why they have such varied levels in Mario is to provide this kind of hills and valleys type of progression. If you want to know more about hills and valleys, there's an extra credits episode. It's this type of thing that keeps the player engaged almost at all times. And Mario does this all the time because Nintendo's philosophy for design is always about fun, and they're trying to make sure that the player has not too much challenge, but has just enough to make them feel fresh. So they want to play the game in one sitting, and they'll always come across something new, always something more fresh and something interesting. So they always hold interest level and engagement higher than something like challenge. But if you look at a game like Celeste, Celeste is all about singling out one type of mechanic. Now they do have varied mechanics in that game, but the point is to master the mechanic, right? So by the end of the game, you're just like, flying across levels and everything. So they have different levels, but they all iterate on the same type of mechanic. Levels in an arcade game, if you think about like vertical shmups, for example, those are just changes of setting, right? They don't really change the level layout at all. They do change, however, the types of enemies that come forward. So in those types of games, it doesn't really matter. I think the most important thing to take away from this is, again, as I say with all the games that I talk about, it's about the type of experience that you want to deliver. Once you know what type of experience that you want, then that will inform pretty much every single facet from then on. Maybe different types of terrain that have different types of movements with the chickens, maybe different types of terrain that affect the vehicle's speeds, or maybe just different types of levels that have different types of roads that affect the way that the cars go. Maybe just each level has a different selection of cars. Maybe the cars are tied to a different type of setting. And I know you were concerned with having a lose state or a fail state. One of the things about fail states and win states is that they both have to motivate the player to do something. They have to somehow be factored into the gameplay loop to where the player understands that they have to go one way and not the other. As for the fail state in this game, I'm not exactly sure myself about what I would put in this game. I do believe, though, that the fail state has to be connected with the gameplay loop somehow, and somehow acts as more motivation for the player to continue forward. So just think about your gameplay loop, think about the skill that you're trying to build up with the player, and think of the antithesis to that skill, and that would be your fail state. I hope what I said here was helpful in some way. So thank you again for submitting this game. If you are not this developer and you have a game that you want me to cover, then go ahead and submit it to me. There's a link in the description, or there's a website you can go to. You can go to gamesover.coffee. This is my second channel. I have a main channel also called Games Over Coffee. I have no coffee with me today, so dang. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys later.